Welcome to another edition of Tackle Talk Live. We apologize. We had a few technical issues. We've got storms rolling through Natchitoches Parish right now, and maybe that's affecting our audio a little bit. Hopefully you've got it. Let us know. I know a lot of you are out there watching on YouTube right now and Facebook Live, so let us know. Kevin's got his phone turned on there. Let us know if the signal's not good or not right, because today's show is a good one. We're going to talk about the Hemphill Gang, the original Hemphill Gang from Toledo Bend, and with some of the most legendary anglers of the sport. And today's special guest is one of those anglers. Mr. Tommy Martin's going to be on with us, Kevin.
He is, and we're going to break it down. There's so many, stories and myths and everything out there about the Hemphill Gang. Who's in the Hemphill Gang? Who was members of the Hemphill Gang? What they were, what they did, and all of us around Toledo and Sam Rayburn, we know about them gentlemen. We're really going to break this down. This is going to be a series. We're going to have Tommy Martin. We'll have Harold Allen on later this week that we'll release, and hopefully several more of those guys that we're trying to work out dates with. But we're really going to dive into the times of the Hemphill Gang back when it all started.
We're hoping to have Larry Nixon on next week. I'll be making contact with Larry, and hopefully that'll work out for us. And then after that, we're going to do another little focus on what's called the Conroe Gang, which I did not know about until today, which was Zell Rowland, Rick Klein, and Gary Klein. And so back in the days of 60s and 70s, when those guys were coming up as anglers, they were known as the Conroe Gang. But today, the next 3 episodes are going to focus on the Hemphill Gang. So real quick, Kevin, you go ahead and get Tommy Martin on the line. Today's program is sponsored by the Boat Shop. And Tackle Talk would like to recognize the Boat Shop as our newest sponsor. Raymond Kidd and his staff take great pride in keeping your boat and motor performing at its best. A certified Yamaha dealer and home of the best motor on the market today, the Yamaha Show. They also carry one of the best aluminum boats around in Sea Arc. Stop by 2410 Sanford Avenue in Shreveport. Let the Boat Shop take care of all your boating needs. Give them a call at 318-402-0399 or go to shreveportboatshop.com to learn more. And we've got another special guest in the studio. This is our newest mascot. This is Rusty, but Rusty's losing his Ranger apparel. But anyway, let's take it away to Tommy.
Mr. Tommy Martin, are you in?
I'm here, right here.
Sorry about being late, Mr. Tommy. We had a few technical difficulties this morning, but we finally got everything working and glad to have you on with us.
Well, thank you.
Mr. Tommy, we just wanted to kind of visit with you and kind of go over here and kind of, the Hemphill Gang, as we talked to you a little bit about, and kind of, really dive into all of you guys and when it got started, and kind of, take us through that route, if you don't mind.
Okay, we'll have to go way back to the 70s. There was a lot of guys like Larry Nixon and John Torrin, John Hall, Harold Allen, John Dean, quite a few of us that guided here on Toledo Bend that were fishing the Bass Angler Sportsman Society tournaments also. And we did well on Rayburn and Toledo Bend when they'd bring tournaments here, and then they'd take tournaments over to Mississippi, Alabama, or Georgia, or somewhere else, and we'd do well over there too. And Ray Scott is the one that started calling us the Hemphill Gang. He gave us that name. Ray Scott did. He said, these guys, the Hemphill Gang strikes again. That was his favorite words back in those days, but he was quite a character, as we all know. But that's how it kind of got started, and most of us were all fishing guides here out of Pendleton Harbor Marina, and of course we fish 300 days a year. So when you fish that much and spend that much time out on the water, you're going to learn a lot about the habits of bass, the seasonal habits, and things like that. So we were pretty prepared for those tournaments, and we did well in them back in those days.
Well, Tommy, compare bass fishing today on Toledo Bend compared to what it was like when y'all first got over there in Toledo Bend in its heyday. Describe the differences. Do fish relate differently now? Tell us the difference between the lakes now and then.
Well, there's not really any comparison as today's Toledo Bend versus, say, 1972. When I moved over here in January of 1972, I was working in Lufkin, Texas. I was manager of a couple of finance companies over there, one in Lufkin and one in Nacogdoches, and I managed those companies, and I'd done that for quite some time. But fishing was my real love, and I always knew I was going to go to fishing somehow if I could ever sneak in, just find a clever way to get in it. And I got the opportunity to go in with my my now ex-sister-in-law that bought a marina down on Housen Bow here on Toledo Bend, and it was called Housen Bay Marina. So she told me she'd give me 50% of what we made if I'd come down there and manage that marina and run it and start a guide service and make things happen. So I quit my job. I had a job back then making about $1,800 a month. I had a company car. I had a good job. My daddy thought I was absolutely nuts when I asked me what I was going to do. I said, I'm going fishing. How you going to make any money? I said, I don't know. I'll have to figure that out, Dad, but I think I can do it. So anyway, that's kind of what I did, and I got down there, and fishing was just awesome back in those days. We'd have 50 bass by noon. A lot of times I'd bring a bunch. 2 clients. I'd have 2 clients most of the time in my boat. We'd go out and catch 45. We could keep 15 apiece back then, and it wasn't hard to do that. Even though these guys that I was guiding, they weren't the best of fishermen, but they could catch them. The fish were nearly jumping in the boat. And we'd catch 45 by noon. I'd come in a lot of days. I'd get another party and go back out and catch another 45. But it was just fabulous back then. But we didn't realize, catch and release was not even, nobody even knew what catch and release was back in those days.
Right.
Most of these people that came down here came from out of state, and they'd stay, maybe a week or 2, 3, 4 days and fish, and they kept everything that you caught that was, legal. Whatever the legal limit was, that's what they wanted to keep, and fillet them and put them in an ice box, freeze them, take them back to Indiana, Kentucky, or Oklahoma, or wherever they came from. But I don't know how these 2 lakes have survived, Rayburn or Toledo Bend, all these years, and still have fairly decent fishing. I mean, they've got good fishing, actually, compared to a lot of places we visit, but there's no comparison to now and going back into the 70s at all.
Right. Mr. Tommy, let's go back a little bit here, and you just kind of gave us your background on how you got started when you came over. When did you start tournament fishing? Well,
when I moved to Lufkin in 1965, I'd never caught a bass in my life. Never. I'd saltwater fished my whole life down on the coast, and this is kind of another story. I won't get too deep into it, but I had to learn to bass fish. Rayburn just filled up with water in 65, then Toledo came along and filled in 67. And the bad thing about it was, back in those days, nobody around this area knew anything about how to catch bass. You could ask people. We'd go out to the old Gibson stores, and that's where everybody hung out then, at the tackle department at a Gibson store. And you'd ask somebody, you'd see a guy that was a bass fisherman and buying bass baits, you'd ask him how you catch one on a worm or how you catch one on... Nobody knew anything. It was terrible. There was no sports writers, very few magazine articles written, no internet, just no way to learn except get out on the lakes by yourself and just, you and the fish, get out there and just learn how to catch those fish. And that's basically what I did back in those days. I just had to learn. So I knew right away I wanted to fish Ray Scott's tournaments. I was a member of Bass back about 68. I became a member, and I knew what was going on with those tournaments, and that's what my goal was. But I knew I had a great deal to learn, so I guided as much as I could. And on the weekends, I started guiding. I was working that job over there, but I'd guide on the weekends on Rayburn and some over here on Toledo Bend. And eventually I figured I'd schooled myself well enough that I was ready to get in those tournaments. And I waited 5 years. I did that for 5 years, 300 days a year, until I thought I was ready to compete with Bill Dance, Roland Martin, Bobby Murray, Ricky Green, and all those guys that were the fishing idols back in that day. And when I got in, ironically, I guess I was ready, but I was still in awe of all these guys, and I was kind of, I just didn't know what to expect. But the first tournament I went to in Florida, I'd never been to Florida fishing in my life. I finished third, and I went on to win a tournament at Beaver. Tournament after that, I went to Rayburn, did pretty well. Went to Beaver, won it.
What year was that? What year was that, Mr. Tommy?
1970. That was 1974. Was my first year. And then I won the Classic that same year. So I got off to a real good start.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, when you started guiding here, Mr. Tommy, was there other guides here? Was you kind of one of the first guys to come along and actually start doing that for a living?
Here's how I started guiding. Rayburn, Rayburn was before Toledo.
Yeah.
And there was a guy that came over there. He came down from Arkansas. I become good friends with him. His name was Ralph Giso. Don't know if y'all have ever remember him or heard of him, but he is the man that I certainly give credit to for showing all of us how to catch bass in deep water, especially. He was a deep water expert. He came from Greer's Ferry and Bull Shoals, Table Rock. He'd been guiding up there. But when Rayburn opened up, they could see that there was going to be a lot of customers down here. So they wanted to fish every day. That's how they were making a living. And they weren't making much money up in the Ozarks, so they came down here. And believe it or not, when I started out, we were making 40 a day, which was a lot of money. That was an increase in their salary, 40 a day. So,
wow.
But Ralph is a guy that really got everybody excited about fishing Rayburn, and he's the guy I learned from. I started guiding over. He kept encouraging me to start guiding and help. He said, I'll give you some bookings, and he said, you'll stay plenty busy. And I did. I got started, and that's how I got into the guide business. And it got where then I had to guide every weekend. I mean, it's every weekend I was booked. So I finally just quit my job and did it full time, but that's how I got started.
Now, Tommy, guiding at Toledo Bend, everybody I've ever talked to that maybe you've asked their advice, well, how do you get started? What's the best way to become a professional angler? A lot of the guys, even other than you old Hemphill Gang members, have said, go to Toledo Bend and become a guide. What makes Toledo Bend such a great training ground for anglers that are trying to fish on a national level?
Well, back then, in those days, I mean, these lakes were they were chock full of fish, so you could catch basically 100 a day if you wanted to. And every lure, every technique we knew. Now, you guys got to remember, going back into the 70s, there weren't but about 4 or 5 techniques. Now, what is there, 25 or 30?
Yeah.
But back then, there was only about 4 or 5. So we had to learn those techniques. And you could apply every one of them, though, to Rayburn and Toledo Bend. You could catch fish. It was a great practice ground. I think in a way, though, I will say I think it hurt us some because we'd go to lakes up in Tennessee or up in Virginia or New York State or down in Florida, places like that.
Clear water.
Fishing wasn't, no, it wasn't the clear water. We had clear water here as they did, but what it was, those lakes, our lakes were so much better than everybody else's lakes at that point in time.
Mm-hmm.
Those other lakes we'd go to, it was hard to catch it. Back then, the limit was 10 bass in the 70s. But it was hard to catch a 10 bass limit back in those days, and believe it or not, and a lot of those other lakes. So we were so used to catching 50, 75 bass a day, and it was real easy. You catch 2 or 3 here and then move on to the next spot. I think that hurt us some. We didn't know how to milk a place, just sit there and really milk it. Now, I've learned that through tournament competition, and now that Toledo Bend is tough as it is right now, if I get 2 or 3 bites in an area, I'm going to hang around. I'm going to stay. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
But back then, we'd move on, and it hurt us, I think, because we were catching so many fish on these lakes. But it was good training ground.
Now, Mr. Tommy, and I've heard stories in the past and from you and listening to you talk. It's my understanding you taught, you had to convince Larry Nixon, right, to start tournament fishing?
Well, after I won the Classic, we had a few local places we'd gather at night, had drink a beer or so, something like that, and I'd see Larry. I didn't know Larry. I was guiding at that time. I was guiding over at Harbor Light. I actually had a trailer over there at Harbor Light, and Larry asked me about the tournaments. I remember one night he asked me. He says, "What's it cost to get in those things anyway?" I said, $200 a tournament. He said, "Wow, wait, $200?" I said, "Yeah, $200, Larry." I said, "But as good a fisherman as you are, don't worry about it. You'll get your buddy back." He said, "You think I could?" I said, "Well, I'd almost bet you could."
That was big money back then, though.
You just need to get in and try it. But he kept bugging me for 2 or 3 months. I finally got him in. Got him hooked though. He got him started.
What year? And I know you said Mr. Ray Scott kind of gave you guys the name the Hemphill Gang. What year was that kind of started, Mr. Tommy?
That would have been around 77 to 1977 to 1980, right in there. Now, I remember 1978, we had the Bassmaster Classic on Ross Barnett, and it may have been right there in that Classic because there were several of us over there in that Classic at Barnett, and Bobby Murray ended up winning that one. I ended up, I think, 3rd place in it, and Larry was way up there in the standing. Larry's career started in 77. But I think that's when it started. It was about 1978. Ray started talking about the Hemphill Gang and their area of expertise. Anywhere they go, they're a force to be reckoned with. So watch out for him. And we even got pictures in the magazine, and he'd take pictures of us, get us all together, but he blew it up. Ray was a real promoter. He was, there's nobody like him.
Yeah. Now Tommy, let's kind of talk about the younger guys that are coming up today versus some of the old sticks in your category, the guys in those 70s. Were the 70s guys probably more natural fishermen than some of the up-and-coming guys today that have read and studied and watched videos and the internet? It's shortened their learning curve compared to you guys. Y'all had to actually get on the water, and it was time on the water, wasn't it?
Yeah, I don't think you can compare areas. I have people all the time say, well, were y'all better than those guys are today? And you can't compare because our equipment was different back in the day. We were fishing. We didn't have near the equipment they have today, but those guys could, right now during this time frame, starting about in the early 2000s, really, a young angler, we started attracting a lot younger guys. We started getting, this was even before high school fishing started, before college fishing started, but we started getting some 20 to 25-year-olds wanting to get in our tournaments and things like that. And I think that's one reason, because the money jumped up a little bit. We got the purses up there where they were bigger. When I started out, the Bassmaster Classic was winner take all. The first year I went, I won it and won $15,500 and thought I'd hit the jackpot. And the next year I finished third. Next year I was fourth or fifth. I was in the top 5 the first 5 years I competed in it and never made another dime. Second place got nothing. So once these purses got bigger in these tournaments, I think we started attracting more young guys.
So the next year that you won third, you didn't win any prize money?
No, second. It was winner take all for about 10 years there.
Wow,
I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because let me think now. 1985, I finished second. I should have won. I had a great chance to win that one up on the Arkansas River, and Jack Chancellor won it with a do nothing worm out on sandbars, throwing that Carolina rig do nothing worm. But I finished second, and I won about as much, if I remember correctly. I think I won $10,000 or $12,000, which is pretty close to what I won for winning the Classic in 1974. And that would have been 11 years later.
Wow, I didn't realize that it was a winner take all deal back in the 70s.
Yeah, because see, those guys like Willard Martin never won anything for the 9 Angler of the Years or whatever it was he won. Today they pay $100,000 for Angler of the Year and stuff. There's so much more opportunity to earn more money the way things are done today than there was back when we started. Right. And again, we learned, you talking about back then, we had to learn to do all these things on our own. We didn't have any internet. We didn't have there was no bass clubs. There was just nobody that would, that would give you, that could help you or tell you anything. You had to go out on the lake and just spend a lot of time and experiment with it. And then let the fish tell you. I used to say, listen to the fish. Catch a fish and pay very close attention to every detail of how you caught that fish, how deep he was, what kind of cover he was on, how fast you were reeling that lure, what long, the color of the lure, just every little detail, water clarity, everything about the conditions. When you caught that bass, pay very close attention to it, and it'll help you catch another bass. And that's when everybody started talking about pattern fishing, get on a pattern, and you can run a pattern and catch fish in different places, different sectors of a lake by just simply running points or whatever the pattern is,
Well, Tommy, now that we're kind of on techniques a little bit, tell our listeners and viewers, what is your go-to technique when the chips are on the table and you're struggling? You're like, okay, I'm tired of messing with all this other stuff. I'm fixing to pull this out, and I'm fixing to go to work.
Well, I'm glad you asked that, Steve. 1975, it was 75, seemed like June of 75. I'd been gone about 2 weeks from Toledo Bend, and I come home, and this lake all of a sudden had hydrilla growing all over the top of the surface over in Tennessee Bay and Miller's Bay and a bunch of the places about in the mid-lake area of our lake. It started getting hydrilla, and it was coming to the surface, And a lot of the old-timers around the marina up there at Harbor Light were saying, oh, golly, this hydrilla's coming up in here, running all our wormholes. Can't catch them worm fishing anymore. So I got out there and I got to thinking about old Ralph Giso, that guy I was telling y'all about earlier that taught me a lot about fishing deep water and vertical jigging and stuff like that. I got out and looked at that grass and I said, well, heck, all you got to do is take a heavy jig and put it down straight down in that grass and just let it fall down through that grass and just ease it up and down, jig it up and down, just vertically jig that grass. And surely if those fish are in here, I can catch some of them. So I started doing that, and I was, as far as I know, I was the first one to catch fish dropping a jig in the grass. And I won 3 or 4 or 5 tournaments in the first year that I sort of mastered that technique. So that's my go-to technique when we got grass. Unfortunately now, Toledo Bend has no flipping grass hardly, or none at all. It's just non-existent on Toledo Bend. Rayburn does have some grass. I've been guiding over there some the last couple of weeks, and it's got some grass, but it's not deep enough to flip or anything, and not thick enough to flip. But that's my go-to technique when I can find that situation. I've always done well because I understood it. And back in the day when we had so much of it in Toledo Bend, 4 or 5 years ago, we had grass here. And I was doing that, and all of a sudden, after all the spraying and all the different things that happened, the high water, all these heavy spring rains we've had, just killed the grass out, and there's none of that pattern doesn't exist on our lakes anymore.
Right. Now, do you think it'll come back?
I do, and I'd rather, how long, I don't think anybody can begin to tell you that, but I see signs of hydrilla starting to grow in certain places in Toledo Bend right now, back in coves and stuff. That's where it'll start out. But we used to have it go. It was in 35 foot of water here back in the 80s. 35 foot.
Wow.
We'd have hydrilla growing 8 and 10 foot up off the bottom.
That's crazy.
And the deeper it grows and the more it grows and the thicker it gets, it filters the water and even makes the water clear.
Yeah.
And as the water gets clearer and clearer and clearer, it'll even grow deeper. So there, down in Indian Mound Bay, there used to be some on a hump at 32 to 35 foot.
Good
And
gosh.
it was just automatic to pull up there and catch 7 or 8 5-pounders. It is automatic.
Wow.
Pull up there, drop that jig down there, and hang on.
Mr. Tommy, we appreciate you taking time to join us today. This has been great. I mean, educating everybody about the old Hemphill Gang. You guys are still legends. A lot of you still competing today, which really is amazing.
One last question for you, Mr. Tommy. How old are you right now?
I'm 79. I'll be 80 in November.
80 in November of this year.
Yeah.
That's,
and any sign of retiring, looking to hang it up, or?
No, I'm gonna fish. I'm a competing. I still fish about 6, 7 tournaments a year, and I still do a number of promotions, and I still work for some sponsors that I've had for years and years. And I'm gonna continue doing what I like to do until I get to the point that I just physically feel like I'm handicapped to the point I can't do any well, or if I start embarrassing myself and I just can't catch anything.
well, I promise you, you're not there yet.
Yeah, you're
I
not
promise
there
you
yet.
No,
that.
I'm not there yet.
Well, I can't say thank you enough. Again, you're one of the reasons that I continue to fish today. I remember when I was a kid sitting in front of the TV and watching John Fox and what was the other TV show? Virgil Ward and
John Fox, by the way, is still alive down in Florida. He had a birthday the other day, his 90th birthday, and I didn't get to go to his party, but he had a party down there. He's not guiding anymore. He was guiding up until a couple of years or so ago, but he's still alive and kicking and doing quite well for his age.
But those were some great TV shows, and I just couldn't wait as a kid to get to go to Toledo Bend and fish in the timber and the trees, and I thought that was the greatest thing ever. So, but again, we thank you for joining us today.
Thank y'all for having me.
Hey, we appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Tommy.
Tommy Martin, one of the legends of the Hemphill Gang, and real quick, I guess, Kevin, we're going to wrap this segment up.
Yeah, we are. And again, I want to kind of, and I'm a nerd about this, Steve, I'm sorry, but the Hemphill Gang. So let's kind of go back over those names.
He threw one back in there that we had taken off.
Correct.
Yeah.
He did.
And the reason,
so who the Hemphill Gang is, and like it was guides at Toledo Bend, Sam Rayburn, and that went nationally, and fished the pro circuit. So you have Tommy Martin, of course, Larry Nixon came on the scene, Harold Allen, John Torian, and John Dean.
Right.
And he threw...
And John Hale.
John Hale in there as well. He did throw John in there. But, those are guys that made a living guiding at Toledo Bend. And I didn't know who gave them the name, the Hemphill Gang. But as he stated...
I'm sorry, John Hall.
John Hall.
I'm sorry, not Hale.
Yeah, John Hall. But Mr. Ray Scott had gave them the name, the Hemphill Gang. And I've always wondered where that came from. Who actually gave them
and who better
that name? Yeah, yeah.
Ray Scott. He just was like Tommy said, a great promoter of the sport. Knew how to energize people, and he's the reason why it is what it is today. Let's just be honest.
No doubt. And he's fixing to be 80 years old, Steve, in November, and he can still compete at the highest level.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a man that has been in 19 Bassmaster Classics. Has close to $1 million in career winnings, and fixing to be 80 years old and still getting after it.
51% of the time he fished BASS, he's in the money.
That's impressive.
Over his career. That is very impressive.
At that level, that is very impressive.
And, so, again, we can't thank him enough for coming on with us today.
And part 2 of the series will air Wednesday. We will have Mr. Harold Allen on. Again, continuing the series covering the Hemphill Gang. We'll talk to Mr. Harold Allen. Hopefully next Monday. We're trying to get Mr. Larry Nixon on the show. Just to continue talking about, again, this is really intriguing, especially for us. We love it. Love hearing the old stories, So make sure to stay tuned with us as we continue to cover this Hemphill Gang over the next few shows.
Kevin, I think you got some news from, was it FLW?
FLW has postponed all their events through May 3rd.
Yeah.
So anything FLW Tour, BFL, anything from now till May 3rd is going to have to be postponed.
Right, and look for other organizations, including like Bass Champs in Texas Tournament Trail, Major League Fishing. A lot of them are going to probably continue to put things on hold until BASS and all of them. Now that the new mandate has been given out by President Trump, and extending this quarantine for another 30 days, basically.
And stay tuned on our social media pages, Tackle Talk Live. We will continue to update you as we hear on FLW, Bass Champs, Outlaw Outdoors, so on and so forth. But, Steve, there is one tournament still going on right now, Bass Cash Bash.
Bass Cash Bash.
As we talked about it last week, on the show last week, this past week, the boat tag was caught at Caddo Lake.
Yep.
Steve, it was a 17-year-old young man.
Yep.
And he was not registered.
Not signed up.
He would have won a $65,000 boat if he'd have paid a $50 entry fee.
Yep.
And he was not registered.
And supposedly he didn't even know about it. Was unaware of the Bass Cash Bash. So if you're out there, spread the word about that, guys. I'm telling you, a lot of people are going fishing right now because they can't do nothing else. So no better way to continue to, whether you want to fish competitively or not, just go out there and fish for a tag fish, because you just never know when you might be that guy.
Don't be that guy.
Yeah, and you don't want to be the guy that caught the boat tag and didn't register. So,
oh my goodness. That's happened every year for the past 4 years. Somebody has caught a boat tag on one of the lakes and was not registered.
Yep.
But now Mr. P.D. Vincent went up, him and Mr. Paul Keith up there on Caddo Lake, got the boat tag in another fish, released it, so the boat tag is back in the water on Caddo Lake. So if you're looking on planning on visiting, you better get registered.
Yep. Thank you for watching. We appreciate you. We hope you've enjoyed today's show with Tommy Martin, one of the legendary pros of our sport. We got more coming your way with Harold Allen this week. We'll also have that hopefully next week. We're trying to track down Larry Nixon. So we've got some great programs in store for you over the next 7 to 10 days. And we thank you for listening. And always remember, if you want to become a better angler, you got to continue to watch.